All right, hi everyone. I'd like to talk to you about some line drawing techniques. So we're going to cover gesture, contour, cross contour, and blind contour line drawing. So first I want to talk to you a little bit about the graphite pencils that you'll want to use with these line drawings. If you have a set of pencils like that might look like this, you're going to have a variety of pencils that you can work with. And if you look at the center of this line is the HB pencil. This is what we know of as the number 2, the standard number 2 pencil. It's sort of like the middle range of graphite weights, the weights of the graphite. So as the graphite gets softer, you're going into this darker range. So the softer the lead, the darker the mark it makes. And you'll see that the numbers get larger from B to 2B all the way up to 6B. Going in the other direction, some kids will have the F pencil, some don't. If you do, this is where it falls in between the HB and the H. And then you're going into the harder range. And again, the numbers get larger as the lead gets harder, meaning that you'll have lead that makes a lighter mark. So when we were working with gesture drawings, we wanted to capture the movement of the body of the person that you're drawing. And really what you're doing is looking for big shapes, general forms. You don't want to focus on any details like facial features. And it is a quick study, so it only takes about 30 seconds up to maybe 3 or 4 minutes to get a good gesture drawing down. You want to think of it as making rapid fluid movements as you're drawing, and those movements should be in your arms, not in your wrist or fingers, which keeps this drawing kind of small and tight. So for the same reason, you want to use large drawing tools like a big graphite stick on a large sheet of paper, 18 by 24 newsprint, so that you can keep your drawings large and fluid. So in this way, it's kind of a warm-up exercise for you, the artist, both physically and mentally, to get yourself into that mind frame of, here we go, we are starting to draw now. And in that way, it's really about that activity of drawing, not necessarily about the finished drawing itself. And because of that, there are no wrong marks. You just put the pencil down and start drawing and just let it flow. And what you're going to do is, as you're flowing, you're searching for the right shapes by that continuous drawing motion. And you'll find your way there, and you don't have to worry about any marks that are in the wrong place because there are no wrong marks. So what's really important while you're doing these gesture drawings is don't think about what you're drawing. Just draw exactly what you see. Don't let your mind get in the way and let you try to tell you about what a person looks like, but just draw the shapes that you actually see in front of you. So these are a few examples of the ones that I did while we were in class last week. So I just wanted to point out a few things where we're looking at just big general shapes of the body. You can see generally how, the shape of the body is sitting with a hand that's sticking out over here, a little hint of a t-shirt sleeve. And I wanted to point out, like, sometimes I will put these sort of cross lines that designate where the eyes are and the line of the nose. That gives you a sense of which way the direction that person is looking. Remember to avoid tiny little tight drawings on a big sheet of paper. Keep it nice and large. And then in some cases, you might want to focus on the folds of the clothing of the person that's sitting there. And you can tell this person's leaning a little bit forward, a little bit of a hint of a hair here in the back. And that's really all you need when you're capturing the gesture of someone that you're drawing. So think about that little wooden mannequin that you see at the art stores. Think about the shapes of those bodies. You don't want to create any stick figures. You want to actually create full shapes. So think about the shapes of the heads, and sometimes it helps to create these little circles that show where the joints are and how they turn. Sometimes a few lines will show you how the fingers are moving. And then as you're moving into maybe, if you have a couple more minutes, you can start showing exactly how the clothes are looking, some more of these details like the shirt sleeves, the cuff of the pants. You can see in this one that the person is wearing a hat sitting backwards. You can tell that they're wearing probably a striped shirt. And you can tell, even though there are just a few simple little lines right here, they're probably leaning over to tie their shoes. And then you might even want to add a few objects to help place the figure in space. For example, this one on the left, sitting on a bicycle, just like that little note. Biking, this was hard. Bikes are hard, and sometimes all you need are a couple of circles and a couple of lines, and we can tell from that drawing that this is a person riding a bike, and that's all you need. And then the one on the right, we have a person who's sitting at a bar or maybe at a table with a cup, and you can really see the movement of them turning and looking at you, the person who's drawing them. And if you have a little bit more time, you can get into even finer details like folds of the clothing, maybe a collar or a pocket, some of the rolls in the sleeves. You can really show the way the person is situated and spaced by the way their feet are turned. I really love seeing these little lines of the fingers just sort of dangling loosely here. You can really tell what kind of a hat this person is wearing. And I really love like these little lines right here that show the stress of the clothing that the person is wearing. So as you continue working on your gesture lines and you keep refining and refining and refining, you get to the point where you can create a contour line drawing. This is also called a continuous line drawing by some artists because of this line that continues along the shape of the object that you're drawing that follows the form all the way around. And what you're doing is you're finding the outlines of the subject that you're drawing, and you're making a very careful inspection of the subject. So you're slowing everything down. You're slowing your eyes down. You're going to slow your movements down, and you're going to make more deliberate marks. And what you also want to do is to change the weight of the lines to emphasize, one, the change in the form of the object you're drawing. For example, like maybe the way this is folding up and the way this is folding over, you can see the weights change just a little bit right along here. And number two, a change in the light. So we're not actually doing any shading here. Don't want to add any value. We're just working with lines. But by making a light line here and making a dark line here, you can tell that there's light hitting the surface of this object, and this is maybe in a little bit of shadow. And what we want to do with these kinds of lines is to create the illusion of space, and that something exists in space. And you can change the structural shifts, changes in value, texture, or color in the object that you're drawing by using these lines. Make sure that you only draw the lines that are there. These should not be meaningless lines. They're very deliberate and thoughtful lines. So here are a few examples of where you can take maybe a gestural drawing of a hand, slow it down a little bit, refine it down into the finer details, emphasize some areas here and there, and add some of those really fine details of like the wrinkles and the nails. And these are two examples of skeleton drawings that we've done in class in the past. I like this one because you can actually see a lot of the gestural lines that are left in place. And I feel like sometimes these kinds of gestural lines really activate a drawing, makes it a little bit more expressive in a way. Like we're not really making technical drawings in this case. We want it to be very technically accurate. But I think sometimes leaving these kinds of lines give a little bit more life into the drawing. So you don't have to erase every single little fine line. And then if you do erase those fine lines and create these really nice detail lines, sometimes that can really help emphasize some forms and shapes and get some extraneous lines out of the way. So this is when you're looking very carefully at the objects that you're drawing and making very deliberate decisions of where you're going to put the lines and how much weight you're going to give them and how that weight is going to shift to help define the form that you're drawing. And here I have a little video I want you to watch. Let's watch this together. That's going to help explain contour line drawing even more.
All right, so let's talk about making a contour line drawing. I have my sketchbook. I have a variety of pencils. I have an HB, a 4B, and the General's Layout. I don't have a 2B pencil, but you probably also have a 2B. I have a eraser, and the object that I'm choosing to draw is going to be this ceramic bird that I found in the Fleischer Drawing Studio. Set it over here so that you can see it. Now what I want to do is start off with the hardest lead pencil that I have, which is going to be this HB, because I want my first drawing, my first sketch of it, to be very light and faint. And it's going to be a very light gesture drawing, basically. I'm getting the general shapes down in place. I'm filling out the entire page. And this is where I'm doing that exercise where I'm kind of just warming up, right? There are no wrong marks. I'm just putting down all the marks, and as I refine them, I'm kind of finding those curves where they are more accurate. So I'm just taking my time, putting in very, very light marks. And as I make this gesture drawing, I'm refining and refining and refining until I get to that point where I feel like there are a few marks that I would like to put into place that look like they are pretty accurate. And I would think maybe right around here. That's looking pretty good. Around this curve right here. And I start to really define these shapes a little bit more by finding those areas and refining the line. So now my lines are really a lot more deliberate. And if there are too many marks that I've made that are in the way, especially some dark ones that are maybe not as accurate as I would like for them to be, I can just use the eraser, erase them out of the way. Now I think I'd like to refine the lines even more, so I'm going to switch from the HB pencil to a softer lead, like a 4B, so I can create even some richer, darker, fine lines. Notice that I'm leaving behind a few of the gestural lines because they really help to kind of activate the drawing and energize it. But I'm erasing some of the extraneous lines around those light areas where I want the lines to be kind of light and delicate. Now I want to talk a little bit more about these lines that I'm creating. It's something that I call the undulating line. So you're going to use the weight of your hand, the pressure that you're putting on the page, to create a line of different weight. So if I made a line of a similar weight, it would look like this. But if I press down harder in certain areas and lighten up, press down harder again and lighten up, you can see how the weight of the line starts to change, and it starts to give these shapes kind of some depth and some movement that one solid line doesn't necessarily have. So practice this as you're creating your contour lines. Again, it's pushing down harder for the darker areas, lifting up for the lighter lines, and pushing down again for those darker lines. And you can have some fun making some of these undulating lines. If you want to go a little bit darker, you can switch to the General's Layout pencil. This is the darkest one that you have in your kit, and you can go back and refine even more with some rich dark areas if you'd like to with the drawing that you're creating.
All right, so back to the slideshow. That was a tutorial for contour line drawing. Let's move on to the cross contour line drawing. So it's a lot like contour line drawing, but you're going to add to it lines that show volume and form of the object that you're drawing. So in this way, you're not just using lines to describe the shapes, and it's not just the outlines, but you're adding lines to create the illusion of space. You're going to continue to change the weights of the lines to emphasize the change in form, just like in contour line drawings. But you're adding these kinds of lines that help define the way the object changes in space that are imaginary. So you're adding lines that are not actually there. Let me show you some examples. So I really like using fruit for this because a lot of times the shape of a fruit, like a pear, would generally be kind of a flat contour line drawing, because if you're drawing just the outline, it's just the shape of that fruit, and there's really no good way of defining the form, the volume of it. But if you add these cross contour lines that go across the shape of the fruit, you can see how it becomes full here, dips in a little bit here, and then it's full again right here. There's a little fold over here. You can see how it kind of dips down into the stem right here. So that's what additions of these cross contour lines, think of it as something that goes across the object that you're drawing. That's what you can do with these lines. I want you to notice in this particular drawing some that are really not as effective as these lines that the person added for the shadow. Now, you wouldn't want to use cross contour lines to define a shadow, because shadows are inherently just flat, the cast shadow on the table. So what you want to do is think of these lines as lifting up and bringing volume to the object, but the shadows are flat. So I wouldn't use these kinds of lines to create a shadow. Notice that in this bell pepper shape here, in some of the parts where it becomes very full and wide, the lines get a little bit wider. And when it gets a little bit tighter and thinner, the lines also come a little bit closer. And that way it looks almost like a topographical map in a way. A couple more examples of fruit that lend itself really well to this type of drawing. You can really see the way that the shape of this is like an edge right here that kind of dips in and then comes back out again. And in these, a couple of these examples, you can see there are horizontal lines and vertical lines that define this form. And it kind of just depends on what you're drawing, whether you need both. In most cases, I think just choosing one will be enough, but if you like to use both in your drawing, you can. These are examples of some bones that we have in the studio that you can draw. Again, look at the way that the form, you can see how it comes up in space and then it flattens out a little bit, and then there's like a little bump up here. The only way we would know that this is the shape of this bone is because of these cross contour lines that show across the surface. And I love in this seashell how you can tell that this is a concave shape because of the way the lines swoosh up in this direction. And then down here we have rounded convex shapes, the way that they just turn and go in the other direction. And then you can really help to find some really more complex forms like an arm or a hand by the way these lines form around the shapes of your fingers and the wrist. So here I have a tutorial video on cross contour line drawing. Let's watch that.
All right, let's talk about making a cross contour line drawing. What I have here is my sketchbook, a variety of drawing pencils, my eraser, and the object I'm going to draw today is this apple. It's an artificial fruit. Now, when we've talked about drawing contour line drawings, we're talking about finding the shape, the outline of the objects, places where the form changes and turns, and you're finding those outlines and you're drawing them and you're refining the line to define the object that you're drawing. But what happens if you're drawing a simple form such as an apple where you really just have the outer line and nothing interior to define this shape, and you end up basically with a flat circle? What we want to do is to create the illusion of volume and form by adding what we call cross contour lines that define the way the object moves in space as it comes out towards you and recedes back again. So what I want you to do is to imagine on the object that you're drawing a series of lines that's falling across that shape. So for example, if you were to take a row of strings and flopped it across, what would it look like? Or sometimes I think about like if you see light coming through the blinds and the sunlight is coming through and is casting shadows of the lines falling across the object, what would that look like? So what I've done with this fruit is I've actually penciled in, or I've used a marker to draw in this idea of what those kinds of lines might look like. Now, please don't do this with your fruit. I want you to just imagine it as you're drawing. I just did it this way so that you can see what I'm talking about. These are lines that are going horizontally across the fruit. And then you could also imagine what the lines might look like as they go vertically. Now, how do you choose which lines you want to use to draw the object you're drawing? Well, it really depends on which lines define the shape the best. In a shape like this, it really doesn't matter. Like these lines really both work just as well, but you're going to find certain shapes are going to work better with lines that go across the form this way or across the form this way. And you're going to decide as the artist which is the best way to define the form. So if we're going to draw this apple using these cross contour lines, we're going to again start with an HB, or the hardest pencil lead that you have. So we're starting with basically the same method of creating a drawing, is to start with like a gestural, very light gestural shape. Keep your marks light and draw what you see. So there it is. Basically, that's my finished contour line drawing. Like I said, it looks like a very flat image because all we really have defining the shape is this outline. So let's add those cross contour lines to help create that illusion of volume. I'm going to start adding a few lines that kind of cut across this way. Now make sure that these cross contour lines are not arbitrary. Look carefully at the way your fruit is shaped. Like there's a little dent in this apple right here, and I'm going to define that with the way the cross contour line changes just a little bit right there. And it's a lot more rounded on this side. We might be seeing it a little bit differently from my perspective and your perspective. Now notice that just like I did with contour line drawings, I want my cross contour lines to have that same undulating line. It really adds a lot of life to the line and brings an added amount of depth. And that really just helps to emphasize the volume and the shape of the object that you're drawing. I want you to notice that there's a tendency for dark lines to recede. So I'm making my dark lines that go back a little bit darker at the tips, and light lines will tend to come forward. So here I have some slightly lighter lines right along here, and it looks like the light is kind of hitting that shape. There's a little dark area here, so it's sitting back a little bit, and here these lighter lines are again coming a little bit forward. And now I'm going to switch to the 4B pencil and create even richer dark areas to pull out some of the depth even more. And there you have it. It's a cross contour line drawing that defines the volume and the shape of the object that you're drawing.
All right, so let's head back to our slideshow again. That is your tutorial for cross contour line drawing. And now we're going to move into one other type of line drawing that we want to go over in this class, which is blind contour. Now this is a very different way of drawing because what you're doing is you're only looking at the subject that you're drawing and not at the paper. So what you want to do is put your hand or your pencil down on the paper and only looking at the object that you're drawing, you're going to go very, very slowly, move your eyes around the person or the object that you're drawing, and you're going to move your hand at the same speed, nice and slow speed. You want to keep the pencil down on the paper for the entire drawing. You don't want to pick it up because since you're not looking at the paper, you'll lose your place. You won't know where to put the pencil back down. So you're going to keep it down. You end up drawing some lines that aren't really there just to connect all the parts and pieces, and that's fine. What the purpose of this is to focus on being able to see fine details and find that place where you can become a little bit more meditative in your drawing, so you can just slow it down and get your whole mind and body to slow down while you're working. And again, just like in some of the other drawings like gesture, we're not really interested in exact representation. This is about the activity of the drawing, not so much the finished work. So the great thing is there are no wrong marks. It's about the act of doing this drawing. So here are a few examples of blind contour drawing. As you can expect, if you're not looking at the paper while you're drawing, you know, things get a little bit wacky and out of place, and that's what's going to happen. But you can get some really interesting drawings out of it. The most important part is to slow down and draw every little hair, every little eyelash. Make sure you get the folds of the lips just right. And just to take your time with every mark. I think some of these marks down here look like they were made very, very quickly. So I would rather see some of the slower marks that you see up here and let yourself slow down and make those marks. And things are going to be out of place and out of whack, and that is fine because, again, it's about you getting into this different mind frame of drawing in a different way. Now, I don't actually have a lot of photographs of work in this way because we usually do these as class exercises and it's a lot of fun, and then everybody just takes their drawings with them. So I've had to add a few more that I found online that I feel like are really good examples of what a blind contour drawing looks like. So for your homework, I'm asking you to do some line drawing studies. So what you're going to do is put these studies in your sketchbook. Please fill the entire page of your sketchbook with one drawing each. You're going to use a graphite stick for the gesture drawings and use a pencil and eraser for your contour and your cross contour drawings. So for your gesture drawings, please choose 3 objects and make 3 gesture drawings of each of them. And remember that a gesture drawing could take anywhere from a minute to 3 minutes. So this part of your homework will take about 3 to 10 minutes. I'd like to take either one of those objects, or you can choose another object, any object of your choice, and make one contour line drawing of that object. Now, this should take a little bit longer. Spend some time really refining those lines and getting everything to look just right. So think of it as maybe about 20 or 30 minutes on this drawing. I'd like for you to choose something smallish that can fit in your hand with an interesting shape and not too much texture. So you're looking for shapes and forms, but not a lot of texture on the surface, not too much texture in the decorations on the surface either. And there are going to be a couple of slides coming up where I can show you some recommendations. And then I'd like for you to make one cross contour line drawing. Choose either a fruit or a bone like the examples that I showed you. And again, this one should take another 20 to 30 minutes. So you're going to really slow down and refine your drawing for this one. So let's talk about the objects that you want to choose. Think about the shape, something interesting like that little wooden birdhouse that has interesting folds and shapes and angles, but not a ball, something that's round where you're just going to draw a circle and then a lot of little spikes. So you don't want to go with a simple shape that's round, and you don't want to go with something that has just a lot of textures all over it. So in the same way, something like this green goblet has a more interesting shape. It kind of moves in space more so than this orange cup, which is really just a cylinder with some texture on the surface. So this is the ceramic bird that I use for my example. This is a really great one to draw because it has some really interesting, soft, flowy, organic shapes on it. And a pine cone can be a really interesting subject for a drawing down the road, but for this one, you're going to get caught trying to figure out where each of those little folds of the pine cone go. So stay away from really tight textures like a pine cone. Now, where are you going to find these objects to draw? You can either look around in your own space, in your own home, and find something that you would be interested in drawing, or we have these objects that are available for you in the Fletcher Drawing Studio. Over here on the shelf with the toys, that's pointing over here in this corner, or this entire shelf right here is all drawing objects. And then here at the bottom, there's a basket of fruit. If you can, if you'd like to, you can choose one of these fruits to draw, or you can choose like a real fruit instead. And if you're interested in drawing some bones, we actually have a drawer that's full of bones. It's labeled bones. This is on the side of the table that's near the sink. So you can see inside the drawer, there are a lot of good bones that have these nice rounded shapes, these little interior spaces. These are really great for cross contour line drawings. And if you didn't get a chance to get a graphite stick, on the table on the other side from the sink, we have this drawer over here in the corner. It's actually labeled bulldog clips. So yes, there are bulldog clips stored in there, but then there's that little tray of graphite sticks. So feel free to go in there and get graphite sticks from that drawer if you need it. And remember that there are more sheets of newsprint in my flat file. Label with my name is the top one. And that is it for this slideshow. We will talk about your drawings and a little bit more about line drawings during our next class.